find the exact point you're missing, or that you were looking for. You got limited time. If you have to do that with every single question, do so. Obviously, if you were you probably one, but there's somebody who's using it who didn't write it themselves would have a really hard time. Here's a second example. Any differences?
They have it like in columns almost, so it might be a little bit easier to find where it is. Maybe like each column is like a different topic, I don't know.
Like their categories. The headings and they're bolded, so you can see them more clear.
Yeah, what else?
Separated from each other, so it's not like equal information. Here's different cases.
Okay, anyone else?
There's a chart, I think.
Alright, so here's what I recommend when you're doing cheat sheets. Okay?
The Google slide method.
Okay, you create a grid. Okay? This particular one's a 3x5, could be a 3x4, could be a 2x5. You'll have to figure it out based upon the information that you want to populate it with. Each grid, each block in the grid refers to a topic. And it needs to have all the information of that topic in full in the block. Now, when you're writing things up in the block, okay, you need to make liberal use of capital letters, bold letters, bold italicized, maybe bold underlined, whatever organized structure that you like, and you keep it the same going down. Eventually, what you want to try and do is potentially get to bullet points, because they organize and separate out all of the information that you need. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, this individual attempted to follow, some of the things that I'm saying here. Didn't necessarily hit all of them, but it is still broken up into a block-like structure. Ideally, what you'll do is your blocks will probably follow a chronological order of some kind, so that you have multiple ways of locating information on the page. If you notice something happened, say, in the 1500s, well, okay, the 1500s happened during, maybe the Renaissance. Okay, well, all right, so the Commercial Revolution, Renaissance, here we go. And you can find information that way. Now, to do this properly, takes a lot of time. So I've already told you guys that the main benefit of having a cheat sheet isn't having a cheat sheet, but doing the cheat sheet. Because if you spend the time properly to go through the slides and go through class notes, by the time you've created the cheat sheet, you probably won't even need it. Because you'll know the information that well. You might have to refer back to it just for something here or there. I am not naive enough to think that every single one of you are going to go out there and do this yourself. Okay? So, your next best option is to have 3 friends, and the 4 of you break it up and create a cheat sheet together. Okay? At least that way you're still doing the cheat sheet and you can still know where the information is and you can work on the placement with it. If you walk into my exam on Monday without a cheat sheet, for 98% of you, I guarantee you'll get it. Okay? There is, only a handful of people in the entire sophomore class who could walk in without a cheat sheet and pass the exam. I got statistics to back it up. Okay? And yeah, I can even tell you who you are.
You know the software again.
The next worst thing is getting a copy of a cheat sheet from somebody on Monday morning. Because you might pass, but I'm hard pressed to believe that you'll get above a 75. And the reason is that you're going to be handed this, and you're going to have no clue whatsoever where any of the information is on the page. What's that? Well, all right, if you're going to be too lazy and you're ready to fucking work, then at least call somebody on Sunday and try to get a copy of it, and then have to spend a couple hours reading through it and know where all the information is. That's my advice. Again, which option you choose is up to you. I'm not grading you on it. I'm just telling you, and I saw it 65 times last year, because there was about 65 students in the class, exactly what worked and what didn't work. So I'm telling you what people got based upon what they did. So for those who had no cheat sheet, you know, half of them failed, the rest got below a 70, because I gave them a cheat sheet. I'm not giving you guys a cheat sheet if you don't have it. You just are screwed. If you got a cheat sheet the morning of, you know, I would say still a number of them failed. A good 20% of them failed, and none of them got above a 75. Okay? The guys who either did it together, or got it in advance, or did some combination, or made it themselves, they were the ones who all got 80s and 90s.
So,
Did people get over it?
I don't remember. I think there were.
Someone get 100 on the
And y'all got no respect for my boy Gustavo.
He admitted to cheating though.
Yeah, what?
He admitted to cheating
But
though.
how?
He was bragging to everyone. Oh,
But
I
how?
have a phone on me.
He didn't have a phone on him.
He was telling everyone,
he said he did, I'm saying this is class, I don't know how he could.
Look, I mean, I hear you. I got no doubt he did. He sat right here, okay, like against the wall. I was up, you know. Gustavo. Yeah. He had a 2-page cheat sheet, okay? There were no phones, and you know, even if you did, how quickly can you type in, like the questions are long. So how quickly can you type in a question to get an answer back?
I promise you, he admitted to this.
I believe you, but what I wanna know is how. I'm more curious, I get more respect for the fact that he did.
We should call him right now.
You know, you got his number?
I know.
Call him, ask him.
I'm saying his back to was towards.
Someone
the
called
big
my
so he
Instagram.
couldn't open it. I don't know how it would have been there.
He tried to take his number yesterday, and he had a tab open, and he got kicked out. He failed. So like he was taking the computer
So
test.
you think my grade's gonna go up or
he
stay
had
the
a tab
same?
open, and he had a tab open, and he got kicked out.
Like, what do you think he did? He graded half of it.
But yeah, I mean, like, for the final, it was paper exam.
Like the first 2 questions and then.
So it wasn't like, oh, you could pop it in really quickly and, you know, chat GPT or something else. If he had his phone, he would have had to hand type out the question.
30 seconds.
There was a couple that you could, you know, I mean, there were some that you could have done that quickly, but not enough to get a 98, right, which is what he got. You know, I don't know.
He
Like
got
I said,
98 on the final.
he got the highest grade in the entire class.
Entire clause.
Yeah.
Gustavo Oliveira.
So anyway, like I said, if he did, I'm very impressed. I'd like to know how. But it's just more curiosity than anything else.
He all get 100.
Okay, so, is that?
Wait, what did he finish the class with?
Maybe a C. I mean, he had like a 20 or a 30 going into it. Yeah.
So the final brought him up like.
No, I mean, he had done it for the whole entire
Oh, yeah.
6 weeks prior. Like, he started getting 9s on the ices.
Oh,
9?
Yeah.
okay.
Like,
You get a 9 and 9.
he's like, I mean, he was leading class, you know, class discussions. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong, I will be the first to acknowledge that Gustavo has a lot of challenges as an academic student. Okay? He doesn't write well, like, he's got lots of issues. However, he did start doing the work. And he was literally only doing the 20 minutes a day. So, and I know it from multiple data points. Like, if I asked him a question, he always knew the answer. He'd raise his hand and participate in class. On the ISIS, he was getting them right. On the pop quizzes, he started, you know, he was getting all B's and A's. But it was only for the last 4 to 6 weeks of the class. So, and if he cheated on the final, cool. I mean, all the more power to him. I don't know what he did. I mean, even if you had a phone and you were really good at hiding it, there's only so many questions that you could have cheated on.
Did you catch anybody cheating on phone?
Yeah. Well, yeah, certainly on the Geo final.
Oh.
I showed you guys that.
Oh, Gabriel Keto.
Keto.
He got that shit.
That weak ass fucking cheat sheet in his cap. He put it in his cap like a dumbass.
Mongolia.
Alright, anyways, we're gonna go through a lot here. We got until what, 2:30?
So,
Alright. So, everything in the slide deck is on the exam. Okay? We're gonna go through some of the main points here that we haven't covered yet. I'll tell you some things that aren't on there. There are basically 3 slides right here. One's on the Frankish kingdom, okay? One's on the Visigoths, and one's on the Huns, okay? There are 3 slides in the deck. One on the Huns, one on the Visigoths, and one on the Frankish kingdom. If I ask you anything at all about them, it'll be about who they are or what they did. Okay? I am not going to ask you for names of rulers. I'm not going to ask you, for like dates or things like that. The only person saying that you have to know, and only because he's really famous, would be Attila. Attila. So, this is an example of things that, like, really, if there was anything, it would be one question. It would be pretty high level. Okay? Okay. So, beyond that, let's talk a little bit more about feudalism. Who wants paper?
Oh my God.
Take a lot of notes.
No, I just think we even out.
Everybody give me happy birthday.
It's not a birthday yet.
Okay, so when we think about feudalism, okay, we have talked about feudalism in a couple contexts. We know what happened in Europe. We talked about the caste system. Yeah. Feudalism existed in ancient and in medieval Japan and China and many other places around the world. It's not unique to Europe. Europe used the word feudalism. We tend to hear it more often, but in practice, it's almost everywhere else. Feudalism is a specific type of socio-economic order. Okay? Yes. Socio-economic order. Feudalism is a specific type of a socio-economic order. Yeah, feudalism's got a bunch of stuff. You can do it. And essentially what it does is it provides order to society in a specific way. So if we think about Europe between, say, 400 and 700, what did we discuss yesterday was happening? Yeah, what was happening with them? Yeah, lots of raiding going on, right? So if you were a villager in some small town, what were you going to do after you got raided? What? I can't hear you. Maybe move? What else? What kind of place would you move to? A rural place?
They're coming to you, so you're like drive back.
It's like after you get
No, they didn't really enslave people. Yeah, they either kill you or leave you. They might take your life, but so, they wouldn't take your wife if you too old. They'd take your 12-year-old daughter. Because that was about the right age back then.
What?
Right? Yeah. I mean, guys, when you look at it historically, what was the age of marrying? When a girl could have kids, they were considered eligible. They were old by the time they were 15.
Interesting.
I mean,
They died by.
I'm not making this up. It's, we have, as a society, come to reject this idea. In fact, we have labeled it, what? No, we've labeled pedophile, right? But what was the average life expectancy back then? 30?
Like 30 years old.
Right? So, I mean, at 15, you had lived half your life.
They died at 30.
Right? And so you'll see why is, in the first week of school, cotillions, bar mitzvahs, bar mitzvahs, confirmation,
They
kids.
died by 30.
Why do they all happen between 13 and 15? It was your coming of age party. It was when you were eligible to be married.
Or 15.
Yeah, or at 13. That's why literally they are all at that time period, guys. So when you celebrated kids or something like that, back in the day, that meant that that girl was now eligible to marry. You were interested in society to see what types of, quarters you would have come call. Okay? Now, obviously, we don't celebrate that like that anymore. But that is the historical roots of it. Anyway, so if you were one of these, villagers, you were probably gonna go find somewhere that was safer. Maybe that was moving, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was finding someone around who was a little bit bigger and stronger than you. Okay? Maybe they had more money to buy weapons. Maybe they had a big house that could be defended. Maybe they had a lot of property where they could make extra crops and store them. You were looking for some advantage in case
Something happened.
these guys came back again. Okay? And so informally, you're beginning to see sort of these partnerships as people go out there and seek protection. Okay? And ultimately what happens is that whomever had the largest land holdings, the most men, maybe soldiers, maybe weapons, they become the ruling elite. Okay? And people say, you know what, I'm willing to give up certain things in order to have safety. And so they made a deal, right? And the deal was, I'll work your lands and live near you. If these guys come back, you gotta protect me. And so, the head of the property was like, sure, I'll do that. However, and I'll even give you the land, you can farm it for yourself. But I'm gonna take a tax, okay? Might be money, it might be some of your crops. In addition, if they come back, you have to lend me X number of your family members to join the military to be soldiers, because we have to do it together. And then they go out there and they win a battle, and they acquire some more lands. Well, now they got more people. Now they have lands they can give out to other people, right? So now I can give Adrian a piece of land, and I can let him take responsibility for that land and hire people to work the land and take taxes from it, and I'll just take taxes from him. So you end up creating this sort of, pyramid scheme, right, this hierarchy, and ultimately, we end up with kings and nobles, vassals, and serfs or peasants, okay? And that's how it worked in Europe. The serfs and peasants were generally indentured servants, okay? Were they slaves?
Pretty close though.
It's a fine line, right? Like, they certainly weren't treated like, African American slaves were, but were they free?
No.
Not entirely, they generally had to buy out their freedom.
Yeah.
And if you didn't want them to buy out their freedom, there was many ways that you could prevent them from doing so. You guys might not know, but like right after slavery was ended in the US, a lot of the southern plantations moved to indentured servitude. And it just became a new form of slavery because they would just keep adding on surcharges. An African American dropped a plate. Oh, all of a sudden they charged it for it, added it to their account. But they never gave them money. So it wasn't like they had cash to pay it off. And so the indentured servitude that existed in the South right after the end of slavery was no different than slavery. So when you look at, this indentured servitude can be akin to slavery, but not necessarily. It kind of comes in many forms. The one thing that I don't have up here is you also always had a merchant class, okay? So in my analogy yesterday about, was it Adrian who likes to stare at goats?
No, it was.
It was Emmanuel, young guy, Emmanuel likes to stare at goats. And so you had this merchant class that began to take on these trades, and they ended up in these trades forever. Initially, it was voluntarily. You had somebody who was a goat starer, or a butcher, or something else, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to protect their job for their kids. If any of you have a parent or somebody who runs a business, one of their thoughts might be one day, do I sell the business, do I just end the business, or do I try and pass it down, right? And so, in the beginning, for tradesmen, it was the same concept. It was like, well, they had a business, and they wanted to pass it down. In time, what happened was, people got stuck in those roles and they couldn't get out of them, okay? because there wasn't like, oh, you know, you could go off to college and learn a different field and go into a different trade. Just didn't work, didn't happen, because there was no college. Okay? So, there. So, the origins of it, like invasion, instability, this need for military protection, and the need to manage land, sort of all came together and ended up creating feudalism. As I said before, one sec, feudalism creates a socio-economic order that influences the politics, the military, how people live their daily lives, the economics of where they live, okay, culture, whatever have you. So, feudalism is a very important descriptor of what society was like. Stand up if you need to. Alright, now, amnesia play. Check. You know, the worst thing ever is you come here on a weekday night and cheerleaders are practicing right upstairs. Like, sometimes I feel like going like this is like, I think what's about to come through. Higgins Room.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's not enough gym space, right? Anyway, so we talked briefly about Charlemagne, and I want to talk more about Charlemagne. Alright? We talked about Charlemagne's role in, growing the Frankish kingdom, okay? We talked about how eventually that becomes France, and how essentially Charlemagne's role creates what becomes widely known as the first nation state. Nation state being a country defined with a geographic boundary, and generally based off of one ethnicity, maybe two ethnicities that are very closely related. And the reason that is important is because the nation state or countries becomes exactly how we organize the entire world. We, meaning Western powers. So the US, England, France, Germany, all these other ones, they began forming countries. And ultimately, the Western states imposed this concept on the rest of the world. Okay? And when we get into discussions on decolonization, we will see where this actually became problematic. Because some of the countries that Western nations created didn't necessarily go together. Okay? And ended up creating years and years and years of civil war. Okay? Common example, you can look at most of Africa for this, because many different ethnicities were thrown together into a country and said, hey, you're now Congolese, you're now Senegalese, you're now, Liberian, or, Cote d'Ivoirian, or whatever it was. And they may or may not have been natural or cultural or whatever kinsmen that could rule a country together. Okay, so the example I often give is Nigeria. Okay, while Nigeria didn't necessarily have civil war, they certainly had a lot of ethnic tension between the Hausa and the Fulani in the north, who are Muslim, and culturally had a very different history than either the Yoruba or the Igbo in the south. And even the Yoruba and the Igbo don't get together, don't get along all that well, but they made a common cause against the Hausa and the Fulani. So that is the role that Charlemagne plays in the development of the nation state. But he had a second major factor that's critically important. And what we find out is, in 800 CE, Charlemagne makes a political deal with Pope Leo III. Okay? So to back up for a second, right? Constantine moves the capital in 330. Okay? CE. Between 330 and now, the church, what we now know as the Catholic Church, it was a Christian church at the time, it's still moving along. It's still, being Christian. in Rome, okay? At the same time, you have a church that's growing up in Constantinople, and even though it reports into Rome, they're beginning to have some friction or whatever have you, okay? But the one in Rome has to get through sackings by the Visigoths, eventually the destruction of Rome. It has no political power, it has no army, it has no ability to tax. So it's just sort of hanging on there as this sort of spiritual place, okay? And so Pope Leo III has this idea, and he approaches Charlemagne, and he says, you know what, Charlemagne, I'll make you a deal. You back us and provide us protection when we call you for it, and help us expand Christianity into other places, and I will name you the Holy Roman Emperor. Okay? Now, hear that difference in order. Not the Roman Emperor, because the Roman Empire is gone. The Holy Roman Empire and the Holy Roman Emperor. Okay? And we will say, you know what? God ordained you. Right? What are kings and emperors and everybody always looking for? They're looking for legitimacy for their rule, and they all claim that God ordained me to do it. And so here, Charlemagne is getting this opportunity for divine ordination from the Pope himself, and accepts it. Okay? And so this really begins to start the role of A, the Holy Roman Empire, and B, the church's role in Europe for the next 1,000 years. The Holy Roman Empire technically exists, I think, until like 1840. Okay? Now, what's very interesting about the Holy Roman Empire and the popes was it was never about one person being the Holy Roman Emperor. If that person failed or lost a battle or something else, the church went out and found the next strongest person. So they just kind of kept handing out the Holy Roman Emperor card to whoever, whoever was like the big swinging dick back in the day, right? Whatever emperor had the biggest military had the most weapons. And it became highly effective. So we'll see at some point later on, after Charlemagne dies and his grandsons sons and grandsons take over, they're not very good. Eventually the Carolingian Empire dissolves, and they just transfer to somebody else. So the church continues to play this role of picking the leader of Europe for about 1,000 years. Okay? We'll even talk about when their ability to do so declines and stops. But at its peak of power, the Catholic Church ruled all of Europe. They didn't have their own country. Well, not really yet. Vatican City becomes officially a country. They didn't have their own military. They didn't have, necessarily their own ability to, do business or grow crops or whatever have you. They found other ways to be resourceful and grow their coffers. And they did so through lands, eventually did so through selling penance and forgiveness, and they call those indulgences. And we'll get into that. So this deal between Charlemagne and the Pope, okay, creates the beginning of growth and strength and political domination of the Catholic Church in Europe. Okay? There's more stuff up here. Yeah, Charlemagne did other stuff. He unified the Franks, becomes France, grew it, whatever have you. We're not as concerned about that as we are on the fact that his actions led to the development of the nation state and the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? I went through this in pretty decent detail yesterday, talking about the Vikings, their trade routes, how extensive they were. This map shows sort of their growth between the 8th century and the 11th century. They eventually made their way up to Iceland, which was wrongly named, and Greenland, which was also wrongly named, and then over there to Newfoundland in Canada. Okay, they were, as far as we know, the first Europeans to reach the Americas. Okay, there's solid evidence, absolutely, to show it. we'll talk a bit later when we get to the era of the age of discovery, and we'll talk about evidence about African empires' claims of making it into South America, because they're pretty strong as well. We just don't have as much evidence.
Is Finland part of Vikings or no?
Is what?
Finland.
Finland?
Yeah.
So, the Vikings themselves primarily hailed from Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. The Finns were generally a bit separate.
So why
But-
is Finland called Finland? It's not.
There's no relationship.
There needs to be named
I mean, Newfoundland's actually spelled Newfoundland,
Oh.
so it was the new land that was found.
That makes sense.
Okay, that's how it's spelled.
Yeah,
But Canadians actually pronounce it Newfoundland. It's just funny Canadians speak. So, all right. As I said before, Catholic Church is hanging out in Rome, kind of hanging on. They don't have much of a base. The church is also based in Constantinople. Okay? What begins to happen after Constantine shifts is there is a slow but continual divergence of the two churches. Okay? Ultimately, it ends up because the Byzantine emperors wanted to control the church. They wanted to have the ability to appoint the Pope and the cardinals and, have it report essentially into the emperor as opposed to being an independent body. The popes, not one, the popes over those hundreds of years did their best to retain their independence and prevent from being absorbed into the Byzantine Empire. And ultimately, over time, what begins to happen is you're seeing a division, right, that occurs. It starts off with disagreements about whether the Pope really is God's appointed person on earth. Catholics believe that the Pope is chosen by God and is the interpreter of God's word on earth. Okay? The clergy, the priests who were over in Constantinople, didn't entirely agree with this. Okay? They have begin to have a debate on, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, the Holy Trinity. Right? A lot of other Christian denominations find the Catholic conception of the Holy Trinity perplexing. They don't get it. And so many of them over the years have reinterpreted it or come up with their own definitions of it. The Byzantine clergy did so as well. They have this debate about leavened versus unleavened bread. So if you're Catholic and you receive communion, you get the Eucharist, right? It's a flat bread, it has no yeast in it, okay? It's unleavened bread. This debate about leavened versus unleavened bread goes actually back to the days of the Israelites when they fled Egypt. And they were trying to celebrate, I think, Passover, and did not have time to allow the bread to rise. And so they served a flat bread. And we end up today with what? Pita. Right? And we ended up with the Eucharist. Okay? And so it sounds like a dumb debate, but yeah, it caused issues and they had this debate. Okay? Obviously, the papacy continued to use Latin. Over in Constantinople, they increasingly were using Greek. Okay? There was a debate about iconoclasm. So, religious artifacts. You'll see religious statues and things like that. People will pray to them or whatever have you. They had a difference in opinion as to whether that was an acceptable practice. Clearly, when Pope Leo III named Charlemagne the Holy Roman Emperor, well, what do you think the Byzantine Emperor's thoughts were on this? Yeah. No, that's 100% correct. Okay, the Byzantine Emperor's like, yo, I'm big dog, right? Yeah, I don't know who this Charlemagne guy is. Just because he calls himself great doesn't make him great. Okay, so this becomes a big flashpoint. Okay, ultimately, what finally brings it down in 1064 is cardinals gets sent over to Constantinople on a particular issue. They're trying to negotiate with like the cardinal equivalent over in Constantinople. They couldn't agree, so the cardinals from Rome excommunicate, take them out of the Catholic faith. The ones from Constantinople and the ones from Constantinople do the same thing back and excommunicate the cardinals. So they get into a pissing contest, and they both say neither of you are Catholic, and we don't recognize you, and that actually marks the Great Schism. Okay, I mean that was like the first event. All of this stuff is on here. Yeah, you're responsible for all of it, but what ends up happening now is we get a divergence within Christianity. We get the creation of essentially Catholicism, okay, and Eastern Orthodox. To this day, Eastern Orthodox is more state-controlled, country-controlled, and Catholicism is still run only under the Vatican. So if you look at Eastern Orthodoxy and where it's practiced, you'll hear names like Greek Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. And the reason is because the head of the Eastern Orthodox in each of those countries they don't get appointed by the state, but they are more collaborative, working directly with the state. So like, if you watched any of these videos between Russia and Ukraine, Russia's going out there and meeting the prelate, I think is what he's called, of the Russian Orthodox Church. They're doing the same thing in Ukraine. They're both trying to claim legitimacy and stuff like that. Finally, we get into the Crusades. Okay, I was wrong. I think I said there was 8 Crusades yesterday. There were 9 Crusades. Okay, they ranged over the course of about 200 years. The premise of the Crusades was essentially that the Pope made a call saying that we must get back Jerusalem from the Muslims because it's such a holy thing, right? And from a political perspective, it was actually a really smart move by the Pope, because the Pope is now calling up all the fighters of Europe and saying, come unite under the church to go fight this holy cause. Okay? And so, politically, this actually strengthens the church's hands. The net impact of it, however, was the Christian soldiers who went over there did some pretty horrible stuff. They sacked Constantinople, they killed a lot of Muslims, and their actions actually made the schism between Orthodoxy and Christianity pretty permanent, because there was no love lost between them. And I gave you the example about Osama bin Laden claiming, the treatment of Muslims under the Crusades as a reason why he did 9/11. What? Bad long ago, but some of this shit lasts, right? Hey, when were the Jews given their promised homeland? 2000 BC, right? And they're still hanging on to the fact that Israel's their homeland, right? And they're willing to fight for it. So some things in history last a really long time. I will never ask you to know specifics about each crusade or the dates. What I'm looking for you to understand primarily, there might be a few things under here, but primarily is the impact of the crusades, okay? And really what it ends up doing is it strengthens the monarchies in Europe, it strengthens the church, it leads to a sharing of military and technological advancements that come back in, cultural interactions, trade routes, all that kind of jazz. Okay?
That was for
That was the. We also get a new phrase out of the Crusades:
Crusader.
Holy War.
Oh,
Right? So you hear like Al Qaeda and its affiliates always talking about a holy war. That's where it comes from. Guys, have a phenomenal weekend. Study, make a cheat sheet, and I will see you guys all Monday.
Yet, but for some reason, the leadership grades seem like it lays down like that.
You're making that shit together.
You go make a copy of
So who's gonna show my page? I'm paying you, nigga.
Hey, guys, I'll set up an announcement. Hey, would you Monday? Okay, you guys can turn it on Tuesday. We'll talk about it. You might be able to turn it on.
I got like a
But I will not
and I'm at a
interfere
9.
with the midterm.
Like, that's it.